Number 3. The program for conciliar renewal of the Church from the perspective of Council Father Karol Wojtyla. As a man of Vatican II, John Paul II sees in the Council the theological groundwork for the dynamic process of conciliar renewal within the Church, from which the Assisi event ultimately resulted. Karol Wojtyla was not only a prominent Council Father, for whom the Council represented the beginning of a steady renewal of the Church, but he was also a professor and bishop who oriented his educational work and led his diocese according to the spirit of the Council. Few of the Council Fathers could have reflected so intensively as he on the realization of the Council in theology and in the Church. In a treatise appearing shortly after the Council entitled The Second Vatican Council and the Work of Theologians, from his practical experience and expert competence, the Council Father and Professor Karol Wojtyla outlines the program for a post-conciliar theology. Here, we come across a procedure which was already a guiding principle in the theology of the author. He writes, quote, "In the course of theological study of the Council documents, one must bear in mind the general picture and thereby refer constantly to certain ideas or even guiding principles, such as accomodata renovatio, ecumenism, or dialogue." End quote. This procedure signals the danger that the manifold statements found in the extensive Council documents as a whole become subordinate to those particular guiding principles, so that the post-conciliar work of theologians is reduced to and concentrated on these certain ideas. In this way, Vatican II becomes as a whole a council of accomodata renovatio, ecumenism, and dialogue. The most fundamental of the guiding ideas mentioned above is the accomodata renovatio. It embraces ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, as well as the post-conciliar work of theologians and bishops. What exactly does accomodata renovatio mean? Archbishop Wojtyla tells us himself in the chapter Introduction to Vatican II, Attempt at a Classification, 1968, as follows. It means a renewal which, in the terminology of the Council, is always used with the adjective accomodata, renovatio accomodata. This adjective stands for adapted to. The program of renewal must be adapted to the state of consciousness of the Church, that stage which the Church has reached through the Council. That would be the adaptation ad intra. The notion of adaptation, accommodation, includes, however, both aspects of conciliar thought. The adaptation ad intra is also brought about by the way of the adaptation ad extra and is dependent upon it. These two aspects, as already emphasized, do not separate the field of conciliar thought and practical experience, whose most important object is the Church, but they unite, they integrate. The adaptation ad intra, as the coming unto one's own essence, succeeds in the Church to the degree in which the adaptation ad extra is accomplished. The distinction of Church activity ad intra and ad extra first appeared in the radio address of John XXIII to the world on September 11, 1962. It reduces the idea of aggiornamento to a simple formula. Cardinal Wojtyla takes up the distinction and portrays with its help the conciliar principles of Church renewal. Accomodata renovatio is the entire program of conciliar renewal of the Church. By that are meant four things. 1. The word program already implies a planned, organized transformation of the consciousness of the entire Church. Number 2. This transformation according to plan is a dynamic process which has its roots in the documents of the Second Vatican Council and marks the entire post-conciliar era. The council should thus be understood as the starting point of a well-planned process of renewal. Number 3. At the same time, there arises a special interest in ecumenical and interreligious dialogue as a guiding principle. A further guiding principle would be to preach the opening of the Church to the problems of the world of today, in the sense of the pastoral constitution, Gaudium et Spes. Number 4. The systematic transformation of the consciousness of the entire Church is a process of adaptation under the aspects of ad intra and ad extra, which, nevertheless, remains a single integral process, and as such should help the Church come into her own essence. Point 4 of the Cardinal's explanation appears somewhat abstract. What is the exact import of the statement? The basis of the entire renewal process, ad intra and ad extra, is that stage of consciousness which the Church has reached through the Council. This stage of consciousness is represented by the mind of the Council. It gazes simultaneously in two directions, ad intra and ad extra. The aspect ad intra concerns the relation of the conciliar to the pre-conciliar Church. Accomodata renovatio under this aspect means that the pre-conciliar backward Church arrives at the stage of consciousness of the conciliar Church. Thus, the mind of the Council becomes, as it were, the transformer which accomplishes transition from the pre-conciliar to the conciliar consciousness of the Church. Such, then, is the adaptation ad intra. The aspect ad extra means an altered relationship between the conciliar Church and the world of today, naturally in the spirit of Gaudium et Spes, unitatis redintegratio, ecumenism, dignitatis humanae, religious liberty, and nostra aetate, religions. Accomodata renovatio implies under these aspects the renewal of the Church and her consciousness through adaptation to the world of today. The basis of this dynamic process of adaptation is in turn that stage of consciousness which the Church has reached through the Council. The mind of the Council is the motor or transformer. The opening to the world already belongs to the stage of consciousness of the conciliar Church. The accomodata renovatio ecclesiae, through adaptation, however, goes much further. It brings about the opening of the Church to the world through a dynamic process of transformation and adaptation. Such, then, is the adaptation ad extra. The dynamic process of adaptation of the consciousness of the entire Church, ad intra and ad extra, is a unified process because both aspects originate in the stage of consciousness of the conciliar Church, and because the mind of the Council unites and encompasses both aspects. The entire program of accomodata renovatio ad intra and ad extra can be boiled down to the simple formula: adaptation of the pre-conciliar Church to the conciliar Church, and the conciliar Church to the modern world. Or, since Cardinal Wojtyla understands accomodata renovatio as an ecclesial expansion of consciousness, adaptation of the pre-conciliar to the conciliar consciousness of the Church, and of the conciliar consciousness to that of the modern world. The striking emphasis of consciousness in the mind of the Council is significant for the influence of existentialism on the thought and theology of Karol Wojtyla. The visionary paraphrase of the expected result of accomodata renovatio is of great interest. Broadly expressed, the success of the preconciliar Church's adaptation to the post-conciliar Church, which thus comes unto her own essence, is in direct proportion to the success of the Church's adaptation to the modern world. primarily, of course, through her adherence to the guiding principles of ecumenism and interreligious dialogue on the basis of religious liberty. Is that really the way to attain the essence of the Church of Christ? Can this statement of purpose be reconciled with the thesis of the identity of the conciliar church with the Catholic Church before the Council? The program of accomodata renovatio encompasses all spheres of church life, especially ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, which are explicitly stressed as guiding principles. The accomodata renovatio is especially important for our subject, namely the dialogue of the Church with non-Christian religions, which culminated in the Assisi event. It supplies, therefore, the highlights for our discussion. We have to examine which stage of consciousness the Council has attained in the eyes of the Pope, regarding the question of interreligious dialogue, and how the accomodata renovatio ad intra and ad extra works out in practice. We are not so much concerned with the clarification of such vague concepts as the mind of the Council or the stage of consciousness of the Church, as we are with the doctrinal basis of such notions in the theology of Karol Wojtyla as Archbishop and Pope.